Hi, this is Roy Reed back with the Andy Caldwell Show. We're beginning this half hour with the guest Mark Mix. Now, Mark is president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, and as it says, has continued to provide unparalleled free legal assistance to workers and has used cutting-edge legal strategies to protect union workers from the abuses of compulsory unionism. He's appeared and appears regularly on Fox News. He's appeared with Neil Cavuto, Fox and Friends, Glenn Beck, all as well as on, I guess he had to give the other guys a chance, CNBC and CNN. He's also done quite a bit of writing, Wall Street Journal, Washington Times, Investors Business Daily. Mark, I noticed you have a couple of interesting pieces here on the interesting benefits for unions that are embedded in both the infrastructure bill and the upcoming spending bill. Could you enlighten us?
Indeed, Roy. Thanks for the opportunity to be on. It is amazing to watch the sausage being made here in Washington, D.C. when it comes to spending other people's money. There is no lack of that in the so-called bipartisan infrastructure bill and the budget reconciliation bill that's still being teed up and ready to go for debate on the House and Senate floors. But let's start with the so-called bipartisan infrastructure bill. We found out yesterday that there are 16 words, Roy, in the 2,700-page bill that will basically dole out about $42.5 billion to unionized telecommunication companies to help expand broadband across the country. I mean, they try to hedge it and say that somehow other people will qualify, but basically what you've got here is a blacklisting law that basically eliminates non-union contractors from helping to build out broadband infrastructure across the country. $42.5 billion that is created by 16 words in a 2,700-page bill. In the so-called infrastructure... Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, that's worthy of comment.
Pretty good words, about $2.5 billion a word.
Yeah, it is amazing, Roy. And then when we look at the so-called budget reconciliation bill, which is going to be about $3.5 trillion, marked up, I think, at $4.2 trillion, and this has got basically a smorgasbord of giveaways to big labor union bosses across the country. And it starts with giving union members an above-the-line tax deduction for union dues. Now, if you're a non-member that's covered by a union contract and you pay union fees, say, for example, in California, which doesn't have a right-to-work law, but you'll still be forced to pay union fees to keep your job, you don't get the tax deduction on the money that goes to your union fees. So what they're actually doing is they're trying to encourage, as Joe Biden said he would, unionization across America, but they're doing it with tax policy and tax deductions, and it's really an amazing sop to organized labor officials. And then we get to the electric vehicles, Roy, and this is one that kind of affects, a manufacturer out there in California named Tesla, who I think is the largest manufacturer of electric vehicles in the country, but yet they're not unionized. So guess what? If you decide to buy a Tesla, you won't get an additional $4,500 tax credit that will only go to electric vehicles that are produced by union officials and union rank-and-file workers in the biggest unionized car companies across America. So you get a little extra benefit if you buy union or look for the union label. Then we get on to prevailing wage and the idea of construction, federally funded construction that will go to union-only construction companies. And that will basically eliminate about 85% of all construction workers across America from even bidding or participating on construction. That literally is billions and billions and billions of dollars. Need I go farther, Roy?
No, well, that movement, you talk about the project labor agreement, there's quite a, seems like a campaign going on across California right now. We've seen it in our county. We've seen it in the city of Santa Barbara. It just happened in Fresno, kind of a rash of them. And the story in our county, just as in your article, about 60% of our contractors are non-union. So you're essentially disenfranchising a great number of them in terms of being able to bid competitively, particularly because of the necessity they have to make their employees whole by matching union pension payments made to the unions that these employees will never be vested and be able to take advantage of.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I know Andy's talked about that a lot before. These project labor agreements basically raise the cost of government-funded construction. You know, union officials say, well, we'll bring it on time and under budget, and that's a lot of nonsense. What it is coercion and leverage. They say, if you don't agree to a project labor agreement, there may be all kinds of problems in your construction business, and they're basically saying, do what we say, and we'll basically do the work for you at a higher cost. And frankly, these project labor agreements, as we see it, like the Big Dig up in Boston years and years ago, that came in significantly over budget and significantly behind time on the calendar. So again, this is just another example of kind of kowtowing, if you will, or handing out special benefits to union officials who basically want to force more workers into unions so they get more union dues to elect more politicians. It's a really vicious cycle.
Well, as we've seen, union membership has been declining for decades. California, our government here, even goes so far as to try to prop up ag unions like United Farm Workers by some pretty aggressive policies involving our California Agriculture Labor Relations Board supporting pretty aggressive union organizing activities.
Yeah, Roy, you know, it's interesting, following the Supreme Court case that was decided last term based on union access, farm worker union access to farms in California, I was astounded by the fact that unions could get 3 hours a day on the property for, what was it, like 180 days a year, and any union could exercise that kind of access to private property in order to organize workers. Fortunately, the Supreme Court said, no, that's kind of like a taking of property, and I think they've stopped that. But that's just one example of how far the California government, including the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, has gone to give union officials a leg up when it comes to forcing workers into unions.
Right. I notice also they buried in there is a big shot in the arm to labor union training programs, which are important, but they're going to transform into industrial research and assessment centers. Give them...
That's right. Yeah, I mean, these are the so-called registered apprenticeship programs, and basically it's the federal government dealing out money to basically unionize unions in the building trades that basically are the only registered apprenticeship programs that get recognized by the Department of Labor, and therefore the only ones eligible for federal funding for those apprenticeship programs. I know a lot of independent contractors, a lot of merit shop contractors with the ABC, the Associated Builders and Contractors, have tried to build very effective and very productive apprenticeship programs, but they do it on their own because the government picks winners and losers when it comes to this stuff, and these unionized apprenticeship programs are really kind of the ones that benefit dramatically from language like this, and they do have that bill. That's been marked up in the House version of the reconciliation bill to include funding for these apprenticeship programs that are basically unionized apprenticeship programs.
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the apprenticeship programs, particularly for the construction trades, and I was under the impression they seem to be working pretty well. Getting the heavy hand of the government involved, to me, doesn't seem like it has a lot of bright prospects associated with it.
Well, I think most people agree with you on that, Roy. I mean, you know, it seems like when you're going to spend $4.7 trillion in the next month or two on the so-called bipartisan infrastructure bill and this reconciliation bill, I mean, if that's not the heavy hand of government, I don't know what it is. I think it was Senator Roy Blunt from Missouri the other day made the comment that all 50 states only spend about $2 trillion a year on their budgets. So this is double what the states are doing for their projects and programs, and this is indeed the heavy hand of not just government, but the federal government over getting more control over the states and workers in those states.
Right, the heaviest hand of all. Mark, we're going to have to take a short commercial break, and then we'll be back. This is the Andy Caldwell Show. Hi, welcome back. This is Roy Reed guest hosting this sunny and warm Thursday. Speaking with Mark Mix. Mark is president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. We're talking about the many little gifts embedded in the infrastructure and the new spending bill, courtesy of the Biden administration. And those gifts are intended to big labor. You know, Mark, during the break, I was looking a bit at these articles, and they have what I think are some disturbing statements from some of the nation's biggest labor bosses. Here's one from the American Federation of Teachers president, Randy Weingarten. He was being interviewed relative to this bill and the concessions to labor. He says labor is not only all over supporting it, it has helped to craft it. Pretty interesting statement. It's also more than a bit disturbing to see that the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, announced on September 14th it's doubling down spending on its TV and digital ads from $3.5 million to $7 million. And their president, Mary Kay Henry, says, we're going to fight like hell in this home stretch. We have our members doing grassroots lobbying, banner drops, etc., etc. So, looks like...
Yeah. No surprise there, Roy. They are all in politically on this, and the reason why they are all in is because their power is derived from government action. They're no longer interested in the shop floor. They're no longer interested in rank and file workers. They're interested in politics. And frankly, I think who was it? You asked a bank robber why he robs bank. He says that's where the money is. You ask a union official why they're playing in Sacramento and why they're playing in Washington D.C. because that's where the money is. And frankly, the idea that they're helping to write legislation, and this is nothing new. I mean, Randy Weingarten of the AFT, which is an affiliate of the AFL-CIO, basically it was disclosed that she was helping the CDC write guidelines for the reopening of schools, and she was in direct contact with folks in the White House putting together the program and the plans and the projects for the White House's statements on how we were going to reopen schools. And obviously, if you just go down the road a little bit from Santa Barbara and go to Los Angeles and you interview that new union president out there, she says their demands about opening schools were not predicated on kids getting educations. In fact, it's not a big deal if they don't learn their times tables, but they've learned about the words protest and they've learned about the words riot and insurrection and coup. And the little babies will be just okay because nobody lost any time for education. Those are the union officials that claim to represent rank and file workers, not only in the classroom, but on the shop floor. And when they talk about spending literally $7 million for a digital campaign, what they're spending really, Roy, is union rank and file members' money to do all this. And there are lots of rank and file union members across the country that disagree with big parts of the agenda that organized labor bosses are supporting in these huge spending bills.
Right. So, question for you. What are we, the average Joe and Jane taxpayer, who's waiting to get A, the bill, and B, hit with all of this, what is there to be done for us? What can we do? What can the average citizen do other than just sit and wait for it?
Well, Roy, I think if we listen to our president, he says that none of this is going to cost any money at all. So, I find it interesting and ironic that they're debating the so-called debt ceiling. They've got to raise the debt ceiling, the amount of money that the government can borrow, but yet Joe Biden gets on TV and says that this $4.2 trillion won't cost anybody anything. I mean, that's ridiculous on its face. But here's what we need to do. I mean, you and Andy and others out there that are broadcasting and following this stuff need to continue to have conversations like this so the people that are listening can tune in and find out what's really happening in Washington, D.C. In this grand experiment of self-government that we've been gifted by, going back a couple of hundred years, we need to be educated about what government's doing. In a democratic republic, we have the responsibility of loaning the power that we're granted to our elected officials and watch how they use it. And if they misuse it, our job is to hold them accountable, and that's what we have to do. So, citizens that are listening and are interested in this and are outraged by it, I mean, pick up the phone, call your congressman. I know people say, well, that doesn't matter, but it does. Because the first thing an elected official thinks about after they get elected is how to get reelected. And if they know that in the case here in Northern Virginia, over here in Loudoun County, you probably heard about this, the moms have gotten mad. And Andy, nothing scares a politician more than when the moms get mad. So let's get the moms mad, tell them what's going on in their classroom, what's going on in their state capital and in their nation's capital, and make sure they're informed about that. And I think that'll make everybody mad, frankly.
We need to do something. Only problem is for us in California, we pick up the phone, call our senator, I would think it would be unlikely to produce a benefit.
Well,
given
it never hurts to try, and I agree. I mean, it's pretty hard when you're lobbying in California, particularly your two state senators, whether or not they're U.S. senators are going to listen or not, and frankly, most of the folks in Sacramento too, for the same reason.
Exactly.
But look, all we can do is continue to stay informed, to continue to be active, and generally the American people, and I think people in California, agree that we've got to pay attention, and it's somewhere we've got to put a lid on this spending and the power and the heavy hand of the federal government, for sure.
That's for sure. There's plenty more of it. I guess our only hope is a successful midterm election. And, go ahead.
Yeah, that's part of it, Roy, for sure. That's part of it. But being engaged and involved is the most, and informed is really the first step, for sure. And once we get there and they know that we're paying attention, I do believe that changes behavior. I mean, we see it, and it's hard to say that in California because things have just gotten really strange out there. I was out in Sacramento back in 1988 and 89 when there was a bit more sanity. But yeah, following the headlines of your state, it's not so golden anymore, that's for sure.
No, that's definitely, things are changing. The California dream definitely seems to change, and let's hope we can resolve and turn things around and don't have to bounce off the bottom in order to do so. Tell me a little bit, if you could tell us perhaps a little bit over about the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation.
Yeah, Roy, it's real simple. We were founded in 1968. We started working there defending the rights of employees against the abuses of forced unionism. Since 1968, we've grown to 21 attorneys that do nothing but provide free legal aid to workers all across this country. And in fact, we're pretty busy in California. Not that would surprise you, Roy, but we have lots of action out in California. In fact, one of our most recent Supreme Court cases was a case where we represented about 45,000 state government employees in a case called Knox versus SEIU, where we won the United States Supreme Court's decision on behalf of workers in California that they couldn't be forced to pay for special, quote, political activities of the unions and have the state of California take money directly out of their paychecks to fund ballot initiatives. That started a pretty long string of Supreme Court cases that we've won. They go right to June 2018 in a case we won that was called Janus v. AFSCME, which basically protects every government employee in America from being forced to pay dues or fees to work for their government. So all the public employees in California have protection under Janus. We got to work to enforce it, but the foundation does that. It's been doing it since 1968, as I mentioned, and our primary mission is to help employees exercise their rights in America's workplace.
Great. Do you have a blog or a website or something the average person could use to learn more or follow what your organization is doing?
Yeah, absolutely, Roy. They can find the information about the Legal Defense Foundation at nrtw.org. And there they can find, frequently asked questions and responses to that. They can find basic information about their rights in the workplace, and they can find out how to contact an attorney to talk about their issues as it relates to forced unionism and how the abuses of forced unionism have basically violated their rights in the workplace. They can talk to an attorney for free. If the case is something that's inside of our mission, then we'll probably help, and we can help. And we literally have, at this point, at any given moment, about 250 cases, active cases on behalf of workers all across the country at every level of the court system.